We have our lower unit off of the 4-horse Merc in our lower unit stand here. We're going to pull the water pump housing off here and have a look at our water pump impeller. The feel of that, I don't know that it's ever been off before. These poor little motors, they get used so little that they don't get service regularly. Oh, I only used it for 20 minutes last year. But we still need to inspect everything and lubricate it all, especially in a saltwater environment. The impellers in these small motors are incredibly reliable. But they should still be inspected every year. If it was mine, I would do it. So, let's see what we're going to see in here. Oh, nice and snug, eh? There we go. So that's our housing removed. The stainless steel insert, the wear plate for the pump, has stayed stuck in there. Peel that out. We'll have a look in there. Looks pretty good. There's a little tiny bit of salt buildup in there that I'll just scuff out with a little bit of Scotch-Brite. We'll polish that up pretty nice. This poor old impeller probably would keep pumping, but who knows when I'm going to see this motor next. So we're going to change it up. This is another one of those keys that are very easy to lose. It's just a little tiny, can you see that there? Yeah. Just a little tiny needle roller. Sits on a flat there, sits in a groove in the impeller itself. Yeah, you can see here, put my hand behind it for some contrast. You can see how the blades on the impeller are laid over like that. These ones are flipped, one's flipped backwards. This impeller turns this way, so these couple over on this side here are actually backwards. So it would have pumped 50% what it should have. So do that Scotch-Brite here. Just clean that shaft up a little bit. This thing's hardly been run. It's not very dirty at all. And we'll just scrub up the inside of our insert here. I'm going to put that right back in. So this has a little tab on the back of it there that sticks up. And it registers in the inside the plastic housing there to make sure it's in the right position for your water outlet there. So, and I see there's some stuff built up in the housing, so I'm just going to clean that out as well. There we go. We'll slide that back in there, making sure we line our tab up. Want to be flush there on this. Oops, sorry, too high for you. Want to be flush there on that surface. If the tab wasn't lined up, properly and it was sticking up like that, you're going to have problems. So put the tab back in its slot. And our outlet lines up with the outlet slot in the housing, so we're good there. We have a brand new impeller here. Quicksilver impeller, Mercury Quicksilver. And it is, we'll just do a quick visual before I open the package. Yeah, it looks like the right one. That's what a brand new one's supposed to look like versus the old one there. Let's see. You can see this one's all laid over. The fins are all turned and flat. So, quick lesson on water pump impellers. White background here. Okay. This turns around, this spins on your shaft when your drive shaft is turning. This drive shaft here, this part turns whenever the engine's running. So that means your water pump impeller is turning whenever the engine's running. The housing, it's going to be hard for you to see, but the shaft is offset slightly. So when the impeller is in there, it's actually pushed up on one side and opened up on the other a little bit. So as the impeller comes around past the pickup, it sucks water in between these vanes, pulls it around, and then when it gets over to the side that's really tight, those vanes push together, it squeezes the water out the other side. So these need to be soft and flexible, and they need to be straight up and down like that. If they're laid over like this, they don't pump properly. They're already laid over, so when it comes over to the other side, it doesn't expand to suck the fresh water in. So, little tip, if you're doing your own maintenance on your own boat, at the end of the season when you're finished with your boat, take the water pump impeller out. Leave it sitting out, and then these vanes won't stay stuck in one spot, flopped over like that. You probably get a couple more years out of it. So I'm using some silicone synthetic grease. This is a brake grease, but it's a synthetic grease for rubber. Don't use regular grease. It will eat up the rubber on your impeller. We're going to lubricate our impeller. And the housing there, a little bit of grease where that, don't forget our needle roller key. This is one that we see quite often. I just did a little video on the Yamaha, same sort of thing. The key falls out very easily. So with a little bit of grease there, I've stuck that key right in there. I'll zoom in a bit there so you can see. So I've got the key stuck to the shaft there with a little bit of grease. We need to make sure that it registers in the groove when we put this down. It is very easy when you're putting this water pump impeller on to push that key out of the way and have it drop down into the pickup tube there, the pickup hole. I'll just move the camera over and show you. Get that out of the way. So I bumped that key, it's fallen over. It can fall down into that hole, which is where the water comes in, and it's gone. You've lost it, and you didn't even notice because it's so small. And then what happens? You've pushed it down while your water pump just turns. When the drive shaft turns, the impeller doesn't, so you're not going to pump any water anymore. We see this quite often. If you look on the fail videos for these things, quite often that's the most common problem when people replace their own water pump impeller, is they lose the key and it's not engaged in the water pump impeller. And they put it all back together not knowing that they've lost the key, and it doesn't pump any water. So I'm looking underneath there to make sure my key's in there, and now I can turn the drive shaft and that impeller turns, I know that my key is in there. A little bit more of this synthetic grease on the inside, the housing, and on my gasket surface. That just helps it come apart next time I take it apart. And one more key ingredient. Oh, my grease. If you've watched any of my videos, I love my grease. Everything gets greased, especially in a saltwater boat. You want to take these bolts out again, you need to grease them. The grease isn't a lubricant, it's a sealant. It seals the threads up, stops the salt water from getting down into the threads and causing corrosion. So we seal the threads up with grease on these. Every time they come apart, fresh grease. Don't use anti-seize. Anti-seize never seize anything like that. It has metal in it. Usually copper. The brown stuff is very high in copper. The metal becomes I've lost the word. Dissimilar metals. So you end up with dissimilar metals in a saltwater environment, and that gives you a galvanic corrosion, electrolysis between the two dissimilar metals. Copper is an extremely active metal for electrolysis. So any never seize that you put in there, especially with the copper stuff, has a great chance of actually increasing the corrosion problem, not decreasing it, especially in salt water, but also in fresh. So no never seize. We don't use never seize around here. I hate this stuff. The only time I would use it is in a real high heat situation. Exhaust manifolds on a dry exhaust in a fishing boat or a commercial boat or something like that. But I don't use it in my day-to-day work on this stuff. We generally work on pleasure boats in this shop, smaller boats up to 27 feet. So, I was yakking away. I didn't show you how to put that down. So the key to putting the water pump impeller back together is as you push the housing down, you turn your drive shaft. Let's just take that apart. It'll only take me a moment, and I'll show you exactly what we do here. Sorry about that. Too busy yakking about anti-seize. Needless to say, I don't like anti-seize generally. Okay. And I'm just going to lever this water pump intake tube up a bit. So, make sure we're still attached to our drive shaft. I didn't knock the key out, lifting the impeller up or anything. So as we put our housing down, I'll do this backwards here. Turn the drive shaft the way it turns, which is clockwise from the top. So when you're looking down on top of it, it turns clockwise. Turn your shaft as you're pushing your housing down, and that lines all your impeller blades up the right way so that they're all turned the right way. Push the pickup down into its grommet. Okay, now I can go on with telling you to tighten the bolts evenly. So we just snug them all up. Start diagonally. Lots of guys will use those little impact guns on these. I'm not a big fan of impact guns. They're slightly faster until you strip a thread or cross thread something. I like to feel my threads going together, make sure there's nothing binding, there's no garbage in there or anything like that. So I don't use the impact guns very often. We have them here if I'm doing a casing or something with lots of bolts. I'll pull them, I'll use it, but I never use it for the final tightening. I just spin them down and spin them out with it. Okay, so I've just snugged those down finger tight. Now I'm going to turn that shaft. Just make sure my impeller didn't get pinched in the housing there, and it all feels good. Now I'll tighten it down. Not too tight. This is a plastic housing. And that's that. One water pump impeller replaced.